What's going on, y'all? It's LJ. Another month has flown by, and you know what that means. Another stack of vinyl has found its way off the shelf, out of the collection, and onto the turntable. Nothing more fun than digging it right at home in your own collection. I love making and I love watching these kinds of videos. I love seeing what inspires people, including myself, to pull something out of the collection and give it a spin. Let's take a look at what I've been spinning in the last month. First out of the gate from 1989, here's Morbid Angel's Altars of Madness. This is a relic from my 2-year dance with death metal that started in 1990 and ended in 1992. Now, this is the legendary debut. Now, while I've left death metal behind and blast beats still annoy the hell out of me, Morbid Angel, and this album in particular, get a pass, if for nothing other than I spun it endlessly in 1990, and I can actually understand David Vincent's vocals. This full dynamic range reissue sounds fantastic, and tracks like Chapel of Ghouls, Evil Spells, and Damnation have never sounded more sinister. Now, this wasn't the only Morbid Angel album that I experimented with, because I kind of have to admit, I own and also kind of like to follow a Blessed Are the Sick as well. But it was Altars of Madness that got all the spin time in the last month, and man, it still sounds fantastic. From 1986, here is a debut from Nuclear Assault. Man, this was the first in a run of 5 absolute classic albums brought to you by ex-Anthrax bassist Dan Lilker, alongside albums from Megadeth, Creator, Destruction, Flotsam and Jetsam, Dark Angel, Sodom, Sacrifice, Sepultura, Exhumer, Slayer, Metallica, and more. This is just another reason why thrash metal dominated 1986. Now, I gotta admit, so the short, call them joke tracks, which are in between the full-length tracks, now they annoy me. But it's classic, it's just classic thrash, and they didn't bother me back in the day. John Connolly's vocals and Anthony Bramante's leads, they just keep me coming back. This is packed with thrash classics. It's impossible not to just start banging your head around to tracks like Vengeance, Nuclear War, and Betrayal. They made those short tracks even, and even the longer tracks, they made perfect sense at the time, and they could have been assigned at will to deliver any kind of message. Betrayal, for example. A friend in school makes you mad, that becomes his theme song for the next month. And man, that's just the kind of stuff that made sense at the time. And all these years later, 30 years later, oh, that sounds terrible. It's still an amazing album. Check out this track. Here's another album I absolutely love. From 1989, it's Sepultura's Beneath the Remains. The first major label release and first of 2 back-to-back absolutely flawless albums, full of instantly memorable and immediately recognizable, punishing Sepultura classics like the title track, Lobotomy, Hungry, Primitive Future, and Inner Self. Every drum hit from 19-year-old Igor Cavalera, 19 years old, executed with diamond-like precision. Brother Max Cavalera's vocals, who's only a year or two older, 21 years old, riding the fence between thrash and death metal all the way down. Andrea's solos, perfectly tailored to each track. 4 guys that barely spoke a lick of English knew the opportunity of a lifetime when they saw it right in front of them, and they used it to absolutely obliterate everything in their path with 40 minutes of thrash metal perfection. Getting comfy and cozy in 1989, here is Exodus's Fabulous Disaster, opening with a chaotic last act of defiance, hitting its groove with the title track, and never letting up for the rest of the record. It's just one killer track after the next. The only thing that's ever truly irked me about this record is the mix being notoriously light on the bottom end and a couple of cover tunes. Now, regardless, that's what the knob on your receiver is for. Crank up that bass, and it's still got plenty of tricks up its sleeve. From the sing-along thrash classic Toxic Waltz to the swampy intro of Cajun Hell, the punishing Like Father Like Son. Sadly, as I mentioned, it's just a completely unnecessary cover of War's Lowrider. But the explosive closer, Open Season, finishes it off in style. Thankfully, the additional cover of AC/DC's Overdrive wasn't included on the US vinyl release. I don't know, man, with tracks this great and riffs this insane from Teen H, Holt and Fanold, the covers just weren't necessary. Now, cast those aside though, and this is easily my second favorite Exodus album and personal favorite of the entire Steve Souza run with the band. Good, friendly, violent fun. Next up from 1987, here is the second album from Canada's Sacrifice, Forward to Termination. A huge improvement, production-wise, over the debut, which is also an absolutely amazing album. It's called Torment and Fire. Now, sadly, I was late to Sacrifice, and they never made much of a dent in the US, which is likely why. Piercing vocals from Rob Urbanati, blazing solos, and hell-raising riffs from Joe Rico. This album exists simply to destroy, and it could easily stand behind anything Sepultura or Creator were doing at the time. Full of insanely great tracks like the Canadian anthem, Reanimation, as well as Terror Strikes and Flames of Armageddon, which at 8 minutes manages to keep its grip on your throat until the very last note. Running backwards a bit to 1983, here is Exciter's Heavy Metal Maniac. This was the start of a 4-year run of 4 back-to-back amazing albums. Raw and aggressive, but still absolutely and insanely catchy. The album holds nothing back and will rattle the tightest fillings in your teeth loose without effort. Wickedly underrated. This is every bit as essential as Metallica's Kill 'Em All or Slayer's Show No Mercy, which were both released the same year, all 3 shaping what would become known as speed metal. Much to Exciter's credit, they did it with only 3 band members. So they're out touring the world and they're spinning in the music room. From 1990, here is Black Sabbath's TYR, Tear. I've always called it Tear. Now let's not split hairs, because packing a huge Heaven and Hell Sabbath era vibe, this is the third. It's the third release with Tony Martin at the mic. And it's the one that just summits. It finally reaches the top of that epic metal mountain, Valhalla! And it stands face to face with Odin, ready for battle. It's based on Norse mythology. And while we all know concept albums are lost on LJ, see ya! But for that, thankfully, it's just as easy to enjoy this one as a string of catchy, powerful Sabbath tracks with no deep thinking required. Some absolutely fantastic Martin-era tracks here like Lawmaker, Jerusalem, and Valhalla. Huge riffs, just like you'd expect from Tony Iommi. Thundering drums from Cozy Powell, and Tony's own vocals are always epic. I actually really dig the stuff he did with Sabbath, and I know that separates Sabbath fans right down the middle, but this one is right up there with the best of the albums that he did with that band. From 1990, here is Faith No More's Live at Brixton Academy. This is the vinyl version of a live Real Thing era concert that I watched endlessly on VHS in 1990 when it was released as You Fat Bastards. I was hugely obsessed with Faith No More when Mike Patton joined, and this one just pulls me right back to high school. The band was completely reinvigorated by Mike's wild energy, and nowhere is it more obvious than on their own signature pre-patent tune, funnily enough, We Care a Lot. Now here, it's completely revamped with a much quicker tempo, and in my mind, a much better song for it. Kick-ass set list. Fantastic sounding record, and Mike's vocal acrobatics, this guy's range is just off the charts, are stamped all over this one. I would love to see a full show with a solid recording released from the same period at some point. Now from 1991, here's an original pressing of Metal Church's The Human Factor. Now, while his debut on Blessing in Disguise will always be my favorite, and my heavy metal heart damn near exploded when I heard he'd finally returned to the band last year, Mike Howe continues to dominate vocals on his second album with Metal Church. I remember sitting glued to the TV screen at midnight in 1991, just waiting for the single Date with Poverty to come on Headbangers Ball. Packed front to back with pounding, heavy, and memorable tracks like Date with Poverty, Morning, Agent Green, and Metal Church's own equivalent of a power ballad, In Harm's Way. The Human Factor packs a merciless punch. From 1984, the great Armored Saint, the full-length debut and a fantastic, straightforward, heavy metal spin. John Bush's raspy vocals, man, they leap right off the grooves. And who could have imagined at the time the guy would one day front Anthrax? You don't even think of that stuff. That's like thinking one day, hey, Bruce Dickinson is gonna front Slayer. And the thought just doesn't even enter your mind. But regardless, this is packed with classic early 80s metal tracks like Madhouse, man, that one just burns the barn down. Seducer and Stricken by Fate. Dave Pritchard and Phil Sandoval's twin leads, their solos, they're fantastic. There's no other way to put it. And Joey Vera's bass, man, all over this record, right up front in the mix, instead of buried like so many are. And it brings just this huge new wave of British heavy metal or early Maiden type sound is what I always get when listening to this. And it really helps to give this one an absolute unique and killer edge. Love this record. Last in line from 2015, here is Ghost's newest full-length album, Meliora. You just set the needle down, and the intro on this record rattles the room. You can see the window pulsing, and the haunting begins. Now, I have to be candid here. I didn't even want to like this record, because after the hot mess that was Infishna, I was done with Ghost. We were finished. On first spin, though, I have to admit, the lead-off track Spirit grabbed me, held on tight, the record spun, and it just escalated from there. By the time the now classic Ghost track Circle hit, I was left with my mouth open. Now, gone are the King Diamond comparisons of the amazing debut Opus Eponymous. Gone is the absolute haunted carnival silly theatrics that ruins and what you are left with is, it's just, Ghost has finally nailed down an identity. The production, the mastering, the pressing, the packaging, all absolutely off the charts. Packed full of killer tracks, chest-crushing bottom end, clear highs. The record just sounds insane. Buy it.
I can feel the thunder that's breaking in your heart. I can see through the stars can feel the thunder that's breaking in your heart. I can see through the stars inside
And that's it, y'all. That's what I've been spinning for the last month. Agree or disagree with me on some of these? What have you been spinning? What could you inspire me to pull off the shelf next month? Thanks for tuning in, y'all. I'll catch you in the next video. Later.